Take it away, Kevin.
Thank you, Nina. Hi, everybody. Welcome aboard again for another great AIM webinar, this time with our friends from Rocket Software. We're here to talk about the confluence of content automation and AI. And it's an important topic. With ChatGPT and generative AI taking the headlines, we've all been wondering if this is a sign that AI has come of age in our industry and what the real world implications are for information management and information governance. But frankly, even before this recent upswing in AI, we've all known for a while now that artificial intelligence and its related technologies and tools can take over much of the difficult work of core business processes, especially where large amounts of data are involved. And as we know here at AIM, organizations deal with terabytes and terabytes of content, and that is growing, it seems, exponentially, and it can be difficult to keep up, much less use all of that content in new and more profitable ways. But the potential of AI is changing all that. As a result, the adoption of AI is growing really quickly. Look, it makes sense. AI's ability to analyze huge volumes of data, understand relationships, provide visibility into operations, and support better decision making makes AI a potential game changer in a lot of ways. And it's happening now. Analysts like Gartner and others tell us that 35% of companies are using AI today, and over 40% of companies are exploring AI for implementation this year. And that is a result of process improvement possibilities and the boost to bottom line operations that is really spurring that adoption. For example, one study in April shows AI-enabled supply chains are 67% more effective than their non-AI counterparts, reducing process costs by 15%, improving service levels by 65%. You know, these are real impacts. And other examples in other industries and applications point to similar benefits in both process and financial performance. So the question becomes, how can our organizations leverage AI, automation, and enterprise content management to really move the needle in terms of performance? And what is our role in all of that? Is AI a game changer for information management and information governance? Well, that's what we'll be exploring today in today's webinar with our guests from Rocket Software. I'll ask about data and information management and how organizations are using AI to automate processes like classification and data extraction, and where the advantages are at the confluence of content, AI, and automation. But before I introduce our guests today, I just want to say that we want to hear from you too. We'd like you to participate as well. So if you have a question along the way for our guests, please enter them into the Q&A feature. That's where Nina and I will be watching for questions, and we'll attempt to get some of them into the flow of the show. And we'll certainly have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right, with all of that said, let's bring on our guests today, starting with Greg Wilson. Greg, are you with us? Hello, Greg, there you are.
With you today.
Greg Wilson is the Vice President of Content Services for Rocket Software. Greg leads Rocket's content services practices for the America. Greg, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from?
Thanks so much. Calling in from Atlanta, Georgia today. Kevin's going to be back on with you.
Nice. Thank you, Greg. Also joining Greg is Doug Wilson, Vice President of Product Management for Rocket Software. Doug, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from?
Hey, Kevin, I'm here in Tampa, Florida, where it's pretty toasty today.
I can imagine both Atlanta and Tampa are probably, Doug Johnson, thank you so much, Vice President of Product Management. All right, Greg and Doug, welcome to the show. Now, look, Doug, let me start with you if I could, please. AI has certainly been top of mind for AIM members, and it was a big topic at AIM 23, and it continues to drive curiosity, concern, and discussion throughout the community. From your point of view, has AI come of age in our industry, and what really are the implications for information management and information governance?
Well, it's certainly a very relevant topic. Obviously, everyone here, thank you for your time today and participating in this discussion here. And I would say that AI is coming of age. As we all know, the advantages and the promise of some of the stats you rattled off make a lot of sense. And that's why you're here to learn more. There's a few conversations that we've heard from customers and deployments that we've been doing across the board. Certainly, one is around operations. As we all know here at AIM, having custody of critical documents and classification and using techniques, and many of us have been using AI techniques before, but the way in which those techniques are getting more powerful, simpler to use, and the breadth of documents that we can actually apply that to is expanding. And so from an operations perspective, this is creating new tension points that we're seeing in many discussions that we're having. And particularly, it's some of the AI techniques and the great promise that they hold, but it's also, it puts pressure in other areas. For instance, if we were to look at some of the benefits of some of the stats on AI that we heard, we'd probably see that many of those benefits actually were applied both to the intelligence that was found, but actually putting that intelligence into action is a critical point to realizing value. And so that's a conversation that goes hand in hand with AI that we're having with a number of customers. Yes, of course, Rocket Software and our partners are investing in AI technologies and getting more insights. But quickly, we see that the tension point really becomes around systems. Many times it's not just the one system where data is stored and custody of that information is being had, but it actually fits into the ecosystem of all the data that you have. How does the data that was just intelligence was found fit into other areas of data quality, or reconciling some information that was found in one source with another, or maybe even engaging a human as needed in an efficient manner. And so it really touches the heart of operations. I did want to note one other conversation that we're having with customers around this is customers are interested in how are they going to bring AI technologies to their business offerings, meaning how are they serving the organizations that they serve, whether it be modernizing a customer experience in a web portal or a mobile app, or some other digital or even non-digital experience. What role can AI play in that? And very similar, quickly, we're seeing that those similar topics really come into the mix around making sure that the information that flows is very well conceived in terms of how that intelligence is put into action. And then lastly, I'll just say, I don't have to tell this group that this creates all sorts of governance challenges, because now there's an opportunity to move at scale that previously we just didn't have. And all AIM members know that, through the investments all of your organizations have been making, the ability to scale your information governance practices has been getting better and better. And but also the demands around those challenges have been expanding. So we're seeing it's not a one size fits all solution, but the conversations really center around the user experience and also making sure you have the right architecture to put information into action. So those are some of my opening things to kickstart this conversation.
Well, Greg.
Hey, Doug, I'll jump in on that as well, on that just kind of overview piece, because Kevin, it is interesting, right? And I like the stats, but I also think how many meetings I've been in with clients, and they say, "Oh, we do AI. We've got chatbots, so we're good. We're doing AI, right?" And it's almost kind of that. Yeah, that's a good starting point, but there's a lot of other things to think about, right? And there is a lot of buzz. And as I was thinking about this, and Doug and I were chatting about it, in some ways it feels a lot like cloud did if we turn the clock back 7 to 10 years, right? Cloud was originally about this hope for an easier, more simplified future, right? And I think that's kind of where we are with AI, right? And it's easy for this to pull on our imaginations, right? From Tomorrowland at Disney to any robot movie we've ever seen. And I think we also see a lot of this kind of heralded and highlighted in the press right now. We have AI displaying emotions. We have AI writing brand new novels, right? And all of these things. And you hear those and it plays in your emotion, but it's also hard to think about this. And I like, Doug, where you were going, this kind of practical context idea, right? Sure, you can go grab a bunch of data or review a bunch of data, but then what really happens with it and where do we go from there? So I'm with Doug. I would say I wouldn't say that as we think about the context of information management, that AI is anywhere near coming of age right now. I think what we are seeing is we're seeing some of these first fronts that look very promising, and where we're seeing a lot of eyebrows go up into proof of concepts and into implementations, and saying, wow, that is going a lot better than I anticipated. But I do think there are a couple of footholds, and we'll get into some of the customer stories and projects around that. So I think that classification, extraction, there's some exciting stuff there. But if I think about an AI on a much grander scale, to just open it up for a moment, and these are the kinds of conversations Doug and I are having with some of our AI partners, why can't I just go and ask my enterprise content repository, and in this case with Rocket, our Mobius platform, I've got a client that has a petabyte of information or 10 petabytes of information. Why can't I just go ask it questions? Why am I still chipping away at some of these smaller items? And how does this grow over time into something that feels much more connected and intelligent in that manner? And it makes me really think about, as AI in this space evolves around information management and content, you just wonder, if you turn the clock forward 5 years or a decade, how are we going to look at data warehouses and data lakes versus content repositories and databases in the future? What does AI do in that space, and how does it start to overlap, right? And where do those tendencies go? So we'll get into some more of the nuts and bolts of what we're seeing. But I do think, thinking about AI in this perspective down the road of, how do I just ask open-ended questions, and how do I learn things along the way from all this rich data? Like, you could have customer data for 20 years residing in a number of content repositories, right? How do I leverage that? And I don't think we're to that point yet. I think we're thinking about it. I think we're having conversations. I think we're trying to connect the dots. And that's where I'd love this to get to in the future. So.
All right, Greg, well, help me out a little bit here. The impact to information management, information governance, I'm still not clear, and you're kind of hinting at it too, what the real impact of AI is on what we do. Some solutions tout that they are AI driven when really they aren't, and it's hard to know the difference between an AI driven solution and just something that we've been doing already. Can you give us an example specifically of how organizations are currently using AI to automate processes like data classification and data extraction?
Absolutely. And I would also say, as we're thinking about AI, to get the algorithms within an AI solution up to snuff, I mean, there is considerable investment, right? And as we're looking at this within, the context of our content services platform, information management, there are things that we're going to look to build out in-house around AI. There's certainly a lot of partners that we'll also work with as well, that just have taken a leg up on certain aspects of what they're building out with their algorithms and what they're doing. So I'll kind of start there. To set the stage too, I would say, for this beginning of discussion, an example, we work with many organizations that are concerned about the documents that they have in their enterprise that contain personal information, right? And is that information being governed properly? That could be documents created by end users that are sitting out on shared drives, on network drives. It could be out in SharePoint, Office 365. It could also be in enterprise content platforms, much like our Mobius platform. And, if we get to the point that an organization can quickly go out and identify that sensitive information and where it's residing, and then be able to take action on it, it's incredibly useful. And I'm talking about not just spreadsheets, I'm talking about Word documents, PDFs. These could be 10,000 or 100,000 page reports. So there's a lot of information that's out there to comb through in kind of an e-discovery kind of way. And AI is very good at this. And we have some partners that we work with on this front that handle this incredibly well. So as an example, one of the largest travel centers and gas station chains across the US have implemented a solution with Rocket and this kind of AI functionality. We work closely with their chief information security officer, who wanted to do a better job around consumer privacy. He knew that they had been putting information into their content platform, Mobius, for over a decade, that they had terabytes of information out there, and they needed a way of going and combing through all those archives. So not just going through the database with all the metadata, but actually combing through all these different documents and reports to find that information. And what we're able to do with this solution is actually have better than a 95% accuracy rate on finding all of that sensitive information, flagging those documents, and then actually having a process around those documents so that they could go in and say, okay, this document is over retention, we can get rid of it. These are documents that we need to set retention parameters around. Here are documents that we need to manage access to, right? Who's accessing the document, when can they get to it, and so forth. And what we've seen here is a 60% cost reduction in how they were managing their customer requests that came in that said, hey, around consumer privacy, I'd really like you to remove my information that you have on, on premise at your site right now or in your systems. So I think that is a pretty substantial, result there of what they're able to do with having a solution like this in place. And I would also add, one other example into this as well, that's a little bit different way of thinking about this classification, right? So we also have an AI partnership that we have in place that currently works within healthcare solutions. So they're leveraging AI to ensure the best treatment plans possible for patients that have gone through X-rays or CT scans or MRIs. So, if there's a need for a scan on, a lung, a heart, a bone has been broken or so forth. And what these algorithms have been able to do is actually been built out over time by evaluating tens of thousands of different scans, looking at the prescribed treatments, also looking at the impact of that treatment over time across other scans that have been done on those same patients. And what AI is able to do is actually scan through and look at a brand new scan and then actually offer recommendations around what they're seeing within the scan from the information that they have. And where this gets exciting is now this can start assisting, let's say, a cardiologist, a pulmonologist around that diagnosis and the treatment. So they're not just pulling from particular information and studies that they've had, but also something that's much more specific to those scans. And, that sounds nice from that side, but if you also think about content services around this, what really starts to happen is you get the aspects of the reviews that have to take place, of the approvals of the action plans, right? With the specialists, with the physicians, with the patients. And that's really where workflow starts coming in and around this, and where a system like Mobius is very interested in integrating back into AI to bring this type of a full-fledged solution, you will, rather than just reviewing the scan.
Okay.
And then also having a place to store those X-rays, store those documents, and so forth, so that they're governed properly in a safe, compliant, repository.
All right.
So
Very
hopefully
good.
those examples help out a little bit. Yes.
Now, Doug, you mentioned cloud a moment ago. Many innovative approaches and solutions are cloud-based, as we know, but there are times when organizations feel that they need to manage at least some of their content on premises. When is the cloud the best option, and when should I stay on-prem, and what are some criteria I should use in that decision making?
Well, certainly cloud. I don't have to tell this team that's here today and joining that this is certainly very topical. And we really hear three topics discussed around cloud. One is obviously costs, the risks involved, and speed. Many customers that we talk to say are very attracted by the speed in which cloud deployments can happen. There's a perception and oftentimes reality that you can just click a button, spin up some new infrastructure, spin up some more compute or storage, and there you go. But what we've also seen is, whether it be considering AI or even just your content itself, that actually you don't necessarily dial in the cost factor, because it sounds good at first, but once you move all of that data there, you actually bring a lot of risk in terms of cost management. And so those are some of the considerations that we have. And then, of course, there's also risk in things like what Greg was just walking through. If you went through and really identified sensitive information, maybe that's not the best place for something in the cloud, as an example. So what we're really strong believers in is yes, you should look at the cloud. And yes, you should look at premise-based solutions, and you should find an architecture that can accommodate both. And there's some data that we're seeing from customers that make a lot of sense, particularly things that are maybe customer facing from an immediacy perspective, and maybe short-lived transactions. Living in the cloud makes a lot of sense. But when you're coming to kind of long-term storage and then custody over information over many years, Greg gave examples of customers that have stored information for 10 or more years. I'm sure there are people on this today that have, like many of our customers, information that's being managed over 30 and more years.
Yeah.
Having locked behind one cloud environment
Or more.
probably isn't the most flexible thing. So that's some of the thought process that we have, looking at those cost, risk, and speed kind of benefits, and finding the right balance for the project, the initiative, and the business process you're supporting.
Now, Greg, we're talking about the
Doug, one thing
confluence
I
of
would-
content, automation, and AI, and I want to get to AI, back to AI here in a second, but one big piece of this confluence are legacy systems, and you mentioned content 30, 40 years in its lifespan, perhaps forever. Many organizations continue to utilize legacy mainframe systems for data and systems. When does it make sense to modernize and migrate away? And when is it okay to keep my legacy applications? What are the benefits and roadblocks?
Yes, I'll go ahead, Kevin, and respond to that. I think part of it is when you think about analyzing where you are today with applications and legacy systems, possibly mainframe, I think it's always best to start with what are the business goals and what are the drivers, right? Where's that organization really focused? Because there's a lot of things that you can go update and change for the sake of updating or housekeeping, but is it really driving to where you're heading as an organization? So the questions that we like to ask are, is the business data that's residing on the mainframe and those mainframe applications, is it critical to achieving your business goals? If it is critical to achieving your business goals, which could be, protecting our customer base, expanding our customer base, better customer experience. It could be related back to, Doug's point around, we feel like we've got some risk on the governance side and consumer privacy that we need to address. But I think after you find out if the business data running on the mainframe is aligned with those business goals, those high-level goals, the next question is, are those systems stable or are they brittle? And can they be accessed via an API? And, I think that what we've seen with different clients is, we work through this process of, the systems are brittle, but there's important data in there. So let's integrate into that and slowly sunset it. Other times, we take a closer look at how much that system is connected to other systems. And is it going to be a huge effort to pull that system down, or is it something that's easier to do over time? Because I think the idea here isn't just really the house cleaning exercise. It's what are the primary goals that we're shooting for. It's great. And if you talk to most enterprise architects, it'd be like, well, I'd love to get off the mainframe. I want to shut down 50 or 100 applications we have out there. And that sounds good from a cost savings. And if it's purely cost that's driving it, then let's do that. But many times it could be other things. And I bring that up as an example where for Liberty Mutual, it was really driven around a 30% target for infrastructure cost savings. We're going to shut down the mainframe. We would like to shut down over 50 applications. We want to move to the cloud. And that was really the primary goal. And that was enough for them to stay behind. So we've worked with them on that. 70% of all of the enterprise documents, records, and reports at Liberty Mutual is targeted to reside on Mobius running on AWS. And there's many applications that we've shut down across that front to do that, right? But I do think that, you also just have to look at it for, kind of where it makes sense. And we're seeing some interesting things as well on this front that I think add some nuance here. For instance, we're working with a leading automotive manufacturer, right? They take all that business data from these older mainframe applications and they archive that mainframe data into Mobius, our content platform that's running on the mainframe. And they do this because they know that Mobius running on the mainframe is modern. So then what they've done is they want to be able to connect that to a modern experience. So they're actually running our viewing client out on AWS. So you have a viewing client out of the cloud, you have a repository in the mainframe that's now capturing all of that data. And now it's really set them up where if they want to spin up a new environment and put together new solutions, new end user experiences, new portals, those types of things, they've got Mobius running on AWS and the web client to do that. They're less worried about moving that back into repository, right? Another example is we've worked with the state out in the Northwest that were moving their child services applications, their payroll and others to the cloud. They were very concerned, to Doug's point earlier, about sensitive information. In that case, we're actually putting the Mobius repository running out on AWS where those new applications are, so we can capture that data, make sure everything's encrypted, have redaction and access and different things. So what I really find fascinating about where we're at with cloud is it's not necessarily like it was 4 or 5 years ago, like let's just move everything. It's here's different interest of like maybe a repository sitting out in the cloud, maybe just a viewing client, and it really depends on what's important to that client and what they're shooting for there.
We are here today with Greg Wilson, Vice President of Content Services for Rocket Software, also Doug Johnson, Vice President of Product Management at Rocket. And we are here talking about the confluence of content, automation, and AI. If you have a question for our panelists today, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A feature. We will be watching for questions, and we will have some time here later on in the event for your questions. Now, Doug and Greg, today we have an opportunity to leverage all of these things: AI, automation, cloud, data, systems. What's one way organizations can benefit from this convergence, especially in terms of KPIs like profit generation, market growth, competitive advantage, those kinds of things? Where are the opportunities to leverage this confluence?
Well, I'll pick this up, Kevin. I think what the customers I've talked to really have thought about it in 3 ways. One way is that they're interested in saving money. I think that's a key area that we all understand. And so that can go to the bottom line, or could actually be used to get some benefit, to then maybe find some investment of making money. And so customer facing applications and looking at the promise of some of the things that we have all heard around some future AI advancement is making money is another area. But then lastly, the reducing risk is critical. And again, the AIIM team here today certainly knows this very well, right? And it continues the thread that we've been talking about in the industry for a long time, but it's the scale in which you can do it, all wrapped around changing user experiences. And that's the promise that AI has, and we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, savings, risk, these are things that, of course, any C-suite would be concerned about. But you're talking about customer experience. These kinds of impacts go to things like profit generation and market growth, competitive advantage. Greg, can you give us an example of one organization or use case that you feel has been successful in doing this? What did they do, and what were the results?
Yeah, I have an example that I'd like to share here around this. And it comes more in with a client that we work with that's one of the largest dental benefits administrators here in the US. And also the largest in the Medicaid space. And they've got about 23 million members across 28 states. They've expanded their self-service offering for members as well as agents. And what they did was they took a CRM that was running on the mainframe, they moved to the cloud with Salesforce, and they launched a Salesforce portal. So a much nicer experience, but what they found out was all the data and information they needed really wasn't integrated and didn't have a cohesive experience. So what we actually did is on the backside of that was we integrated Salesforce into their on-prem claim system, so that through Salesforce, you could get up-to-date status on any of the claims that were open at that time. We also noticed that a lot of the collaborative documents that they had that were related to their policy updates and terms and conditions were maintained on SharePoint. So we integrated Salesforce into SharePoint. So now a member or even a sales agent can go out and look at that information. We also took any incoming documents related to claims that were corresponded with that particular claim. We scanned those in and archived those into Mobius. So if at this point for this particular client, now through a Salesforce portal, the members can easily go in there, look at the claim status, and get an immediate update that's coming directly from the claim system. They can also review those terms and conditions, and any additional documents that came off that claim are all available for them as well. As you can imagine, this is great for sales agents as well, because as they're talking to any of the members and have questions, it's easier for them to get to that information. And then from the call center side, we actually integrated the claim system UI back into Mobius into SharePoint as well. So they've got a one-click access to all of the additional rich information around that claim. So a really incredible benefits here. What they're seeing is about a 30% drop in calls into their call center because folks are now leveraging the online information. And they're also seeing a 25% faster turnaround on inquiries and calls that are coming in because they have that information at their fingertips.
And what role specifically does AI play in that process?
Yeah, the AI pieces around that are the classification of those claims coming in so that they didn't need an army of people to actually, scan and discover those documents and classify them and put them together.
Does it learn over time? And how does that work? Will it learn and teach itself over time?
Yeah, now I'll chime in here. So with that, what we've done is, for instance, in many of the tooling that we have tools that, as you look to classify documents, it suggests rules and how that might work together. And so it's a very much a productivity tool for those that are connecting systems like this. And what we've done in some of the work that we're doing, and this is why we're also excited about AI, is in some of our testing, you would put together some of the processing of documents, and you might need 200, 300, 400 documents to kind of get to a classification that really makes sense. And some of the latest stuff we have in the lab, it's more like 15 or 20 documents. And so that's what some of the hope and promise does is number one is previously using some of the AI techniques that were described as Greg was saying, it was a huge benefit because there was just so many documents to go through. But then number two is in the future, as you have new document types, it's getting faster and faster, and the breadth of those document types is getting even wider and faster to do. And so it just becomes the classification and the management and more fine-grained management of that becomes much more feasible. And that's part of the scalability hope that we're all looking for from AI.
All right, great. We are here today with Greg Wilson and Doug Johnson from Rocket Software. We're talking about the confluence of content, automation, and AI. If you have any questions for our panelists, now would be the time to enter them into the Q&A feature, and we'll attempt to get them into the flow of our question and answer here in just a moment. But before we do, Doug, tell me a little bit more about how Rocket helps with all of this. Are there some resources or some next steps that you can recommend to our audience today?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing is our team is very excited to have conversations with organizations that are going through this type of AI revolution and questions in their shop. And so that would really be the big call to action that we have. We'll share some information later on around this is really contacting us and having a chance to get some individual conversations about what we're seeing in the market and go specific about some of your use cases. And that would be the big call to action I have.
Nice. All right, Greg and Doug, let's get to our audience questions today. We do have questions coming in from our audience today. Thank you, folks. If you have questions, now would be the time to enter them in. Let's go to this first question that came from Mike Prentice. Thank you, Mike, for your question today. Mike asks, have you had to deal with accountability of decisions from the AI? How to prove why the outcome was chosen? Thinking of the treatment plan proposed. Greg, Doug, what is your comment for Mike's question today?
I would like to chime in that on the technology side and the way that we're thinking about the products and services and partners that we work with, we have to think about this very hard. As many know, in many AI services and means of using the technology, there are confidence levels that are provided with many of these technologies. And what we've also found in our labs is you have to be careful because sometimes that confidence level, when it says it's 80% confident, you have to dig into the details around that. And so you can use some of that information to inform how much human review and approval you want to have involved. Obviously, in the healthcare example, you want to be very sure. So you're obviously always going to have an expert, but helps amplify the types of analysis and work the expert would do. So we're looking very closely at this from a technology perspective, the confidence levels that come with these technologies, and surfacing that as a first-class object to help in this kind of automation. Some automations would say if it's above or below a certain confidence level, it routes to a human in the loop type process, and how to make those user experiences very effective to be in and out is some of the things that we're designing point, both in our software and in the solutions that we have with partners that we work with.
I
Very
would also
good.
say, Doug, I think that on that last question, I think we're also really talking about something that works hand in hand with that cardiologist or that specialist with the experience that they have, right? Maybe a fresh way of looking at this, another input, but certainly not overriding their decisions as much as being just a part of that decisioning process. Yes.
All right, another question from our audience coming in. Do you see AI being used to identify and improve any aspects of metadata, structure, and so forth compared to standards and our peers?
Well, absolutely. As we probably all know from a kind of a large language model perspective, what happens under the covers is these large language models are trained on hundreds, thousands, and lots of documents, and they kind of come with a set of knowledge around structure that is actually some of the things that are leading to this examples I was giving before, where maybe some of the training was on hundreds or maybe even thousands of documents, getting down to dozens. And so we're seeing some of that benefit of some of these pre-trained models. But there's always a conversation that's industry specific and also customer specific. Are there ways in which we can provide the tools to make it even easier and faster to operationalize such documents? And so the answer is yes. And we are working with many customers and industry partners in our ecosystem around that. And so we're pretty excited about that. And it's a great question.
Nice, nice. All right, very good. Another question coming in from our audience. Thank you so much for your participation, everyone. Keep it up. When the time we have remaining, we'll try to get to your questions today. Another question. At a glance, when sitting on large amounts of data, cost for storage seems to be a major factor, which is cost efficient between on-premise or the cloud. So it's all about costs. Greg, Doug, you have a thought for us today on that?
I'll chime in on this one first, Doug, and then feel free to add to it. So it's interesting, right? With the Liberty Mutual example, there was a certain 30% cost savings they're looking at the infrastructure side. But one thing that I didn't bring up that was incredibly important to Liberty Mutual is one thing that they loved about Mobius is they wanted the flexibility to change cloud providers at any time. And the fact that we could take them from AWS and move to another cloud provider in a multi-cloud scenario, or even move stuff back on-prem for them, was incredibly important when and if they wanted it. So I think it's a good question about storage and to think about that. And a lot of times what we'll do is I think storage is part of it. I think what we also see a lot of is access, right? If there is a major audit that's taking place and a lot of data needs to be extracted from that system, what does that end up doing, price-wise as well? So I do think that, cloud or on-prem can work for long-term storage, just depending on what the needs are. But what we also try to do is look at access patterns over time to that data. Is it very active for the first 30 days? Is it active for the first, 3 months or 6 months? And then where do we go from there? And I don't think it's, a one size fits all. I think that we see some clients that really see benefits in the cloud, others do some tests and proof of concepts in the cloud, and the pricing on a much smaller scale comes in different than they expected, right? So I do think you kind of have to look at this with fresh eyes, and I love the idea with Liberty Mutual we take to other clients of just trying to be flexible in your approach, right? If we have everything on AWS and all of a sudden the prices shift there, what can you do about it? Or are you really stranded in kind of one provider? And that's a very different way of looking at it than people were thinking probably 4 to 5 years ago.
All right. We're here talking about the confluence of content, automation, and AI. Back to my original question, I guess, earlier. Is AI a game changer for information management and information governance. So, gentlemen, tell me a little bit more about what you feel our audience should know about their role in all of this. What is the role of information governance professionals, information management professionals in all of this, in the confluence of AI, content, and automation? What is your advice?
Well, one thing I would say is the great news is the skills, the practice, the discipline that all AIM members have been building over the years is so applicable in this age. It's really talking about providing AI is providing a means for another tool for scalability and bringing the practice of information management to a larger pool of information at a more cost-effective manner. So my advice would be to look at the use cases that you have, look at those experiences that you're trying to transform, and obviously, as you're always doing, prioritize what the business is saying around critical documents. So those are some things I think of. And so it's a game changer at a technology level, but at the same time, it's not throwing away everything you've ever known. It's more building on the skills
All
that
right.
we already have and institutionalizing them.
All right, we have a couple of more questions coming in the very few minutes that we have remaining. How do you assure stakeholders that sensitive business information and personal data is safeguarded with AI in the wake of advanced cyberspace insecurity?
Yeah, that's a super important question. I'm glad someone mentioned this because as there's a whole discussion around AI that is around the training of information. We of course talked a little bit earlier about some of the large language models, which have some pre-trained data and algorithms that come with it. But also, of course, in the end, you have to work with your data to make it efficacious. And so with that, this is a critical topic. And so it fits a little bit back into the cost question we were talking about earlier, and also kind of the bounds of cloud or premise. Because what we're finding is oftentimes, depending on the vendor and the technologies, many of the training is actually done very nicely in the cloud because there's GPUs that perhaps an organization doesn't want to buy and put in their server farm, as an example. But when they want to operationalize those trained models, they want to bring them back to premise systems. And so that secure chain of custody over information from the time that it's in the custody of your core systems to maybe how it's trained, and then that intelligence is brought back, is something we think very hard in product management here at Rocket Software. And so we've developed tools and techniques for doing this, a whole kind of AI framework in which you can use some of the best in class type technologies, whether it be AWS style services and various services that they have, or some of our partners that we work with very closely. So we work to have built in that secure chain of custody so you can sample the documents that you have, bring them into that training model, and then bring that back, those learnings, into the operational systems wherever they may live.
All right. One last question in the time that we have left. Regarding information required to be stored for decades or permanently, how often will systems need to be upgraded as technology changes? Has that cost been factored in to the discussion?
Doug, I know with you being in product management, I know that upgrades and new releases are near and dear to your heart, so I'll pass that one to you.
Okay, fair enough. For sure, we think very much about this in the upgrade cycle, and in particular, what we've thought about is, in many cases, we have customers that have been working with our technologies for 25 or even 30 years, and we all know lots has changed in that time. And one of the things that we're quite proud of and work hard on, it doesn't come for free from us as a vendor, but we work hard to make sure as new generations of technologies come, is that we can take the information that's being stored in one technology and it can migrate seamlessly to another. So for instance, we can take information that might have been in a mainframe system, and we could bring it into an S3 bucket and point our latest technologies to it, and it'll just come up. And so the great news is, from an actual data preservation, vendors like us spend a lot of money working hard to make sure that's true. The area that we all struggle with in the industry is not all vendors follow the practices that I just illuminated, but then B, the other technologies around your data change. We all think about the popularity of a SOAP API back in the day. Well, now the more modern way to do that is a REST API. Well, that is a technological change. But the good news is the business drives those needs. As they need more applications and more access, those technologies tend to follow suit. So it's that two-pronged approach, making sure you have data portability, whether it be on-prem or the cloud, that hybrid model that I was talking about earlier that we favor. And then number two, making sure that the technologies you're using are keeping current with the access methods. Those are the two thoughts I have.
Excellent.
Yeah, I
All
would
right.
add to that. I think many times with new releases we have coming out, there's going to be aspects of security, there's going to be aspects of performance that come into play that also take advantage of what's occurring with new operating systems and new versions of the databases. So, I mean, I would say, you know, a 24 to 36-month cycle probably at the outside is what we would be looking at on recommendations with the clients that we work with.
Very good. We have been speaking with Greg Wilson and Doug Johnson from Rocket Software. You can find Greg and Doug and find out more at rocketsoftware.com. Greg, Doug, thank you so much for being a part of our event today. It has been fantastic. At this point, I would like to pass it back over to Nina to help close out our event today. Nina, go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. If you've enjoyed this segment, then you're definitely going to enjoy more information management that's coming up in our next virtual event on September 20th on improving information protection and privacy in Microsoft. During this virtual event, you'll learn about features and opportunities to protect information with M365, E3, and G3 licenses. For instance, you can use sensitivity labels to classify and protect files within and beyond M365 with these licenses. Don't miss out on this opportunity to learn how to protect your data with Microsoft Information Protection. Register now today to secure your spot. We have definitely put the link in the chat for your reference. As we bring this webinar to a close, just a few last-minute reminders. We've recorded this webinar so you can catch anything you want to hear again and an email recap that will be sent within 24 hours. A link to the resources for this webinar was put in the chat. You'll find a copy of some resources and a few slides from today, in addition to the links that will be sent. Don't forget to take our feedback survey and let us know how we did. Again, a big thank you to our sponsor, Rocket Software, for a wonderful, informative webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us today. But before we leave, I'd love to ask Doug if he has any last minute key takeaways for our audience.
Well, my only key takeaway I would just say is thank you for your time, and do think about those user experiences as part of the journey there. You can always think about the technologies of AI, this or that, but if you focus on those user experiences for your organizations, that's where the success is going to be. And so we look forward to doing what we can here at Rocket Software to help you in that journey.
Absolutely. And what about you, Greg? Any key takeaways for our audience?
I think one of the important things that I would bring up is just there's so many opportunities to innovate and modernize within the IT realms that we live in. Just make sure to align those with the business side of the house, right? What are their main drivers? What are they really looking to accomplish? Because we see so many projects start and a lot of interest and momentum in the beginning, and if they're not aligned to those big business drivers from the leadership side of the house, they're great ideas that just don't get implemented. So there are a lot of great things happening with AI and with cloud. You can probably tell from this conversation, there's a lot of nuance there. We're certainly happy to help out and be involved in those conversations. And really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Kevin, with the closing remarks.
Well, I want to thank Greg and Doug and everyone for being here today. Is AI a game changer for information management, information governance? I don't know, but certainly the adoption is is unquestionable. As I mentioned today, Gartner and others tell us that 35% of companies are already using AI, 40% of companies are looking to adopt it in 2023. That's 75% here just in 2023. So conversations like this, I think, are super important, and AIIM is continuing that discussion with folks like Rocket Software. So thank you everyone for being here. It's been another great webinar today, and it's been my pleasure to be your host.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is Nina from AIIM saying, see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.